Editions now. In this program, we are talking about the African youth, and today our topic is African Youth Edition. We'll be looking at escaping from the world systems of poverty and manipulations. Escaping from the world systems of poverty and manipulation, which is something that is very common in our society today. And with us here, we are having a special edition today. We have Mr. Musoke Lucas Lionga, who is the General Coordinator of Excellence Union International Group and a modern nation builder. It's a pleasure to be with you today, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, televiewers. Once more, we are here, and we are here because you are there. We are not here for ourselves. We are here because the population is there, the youth, you are there, the women, you are there, the men, and the communities are there. And that is why we sacrifice time to be here. We sacrifice time to make sure that we reach out to the youths, we reach out to the communities, we reach out to the needy, and we reach out to the nations. So once more, you are welcome to this program and follow suit because a lot is going to be revealed here today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And we're talking about escaping from the world system of poverty and manipulation. First of all, I'd like us to start with the world system. How is the world system? What is it all about?
I wish to, first of all, before I go to the world systems, I wish to first of all talk a little bit about the youth. You know, the youth is that force that every nation has. And the African youth actually have been neglected. I will explain. The African youth have been neglected because generally the African leaders or position holders have ignored their continent. The African continent is suffering because it has been left in the hands of irresponsible human beings who are too selfish, too greedy, and too self-centered. Africa was supposed to be more developed than the United States of America with respect to the human resource that Africa has scattered all over the world. Take note, I wish to repeat, the human resource that Africa has scattered all over the world. And this human resource have been intentionally allowed to perform out of Africa. You see the irony. The human resource that Africa has today is more needed in Africa than elsewhere because Africa is still struggling to emerge. So it needs expertise in all fields. But unfortunately, the expertise that Africa has as African origins are rather giving this expertise elsewhere rather than where it is needed. Because elsewhere, there are greater expertise than the African expertise. So this is a contradiction, this is a paradox that you are needed somewhere, but you are where you are not even that needed. You are just struggling to fit yourself because that environment has super experts. But you are just maybe an expert. You are far below. You want to compare yourself with the real expert that exists in those nations. Africa has experts, but those experts are not in Africa. A good number of them are scattered all over the world. And giving this expertise where it is not actually needed. I wish to repeat. Where it is needed is where emergence, development is still at its very low level, which is Africa itself or Africa herself. So we have a problem, and why? But a lot could be done in the African space by African experts that are found elsewhere who would have come back home and actually give that which Africa needs. But unfortunately, these two set of evils that I've mentioned here have made African space and the African youth to be on a disadvantaged position. It has created a lot of problems, and African youth have seen their continent as a place where they cannot make it in, whereas it is the best space. The colonial masters have done all to make sure that African youth are frustrated in their continent. so that they should see their continent as a place that is not good for them. They should be running elsewhere, whereas their continent is the best place. If they are going elsewhere, they should be going elsewhere rather just to get knowledge and to bring the knowledge back home. And their partners in crime, that are African leaders, African leadership, and African government have teamed up with the colonial masters to make the African space not to be favorable for African youth. So the youth are actually asking themselves every day, do we truly have a future in Africa? The answer is yes. Yes, why? Because these colonial masters and this evil leadership is not going to remain forever. It's not going to be there forever. It's going to pass. It's going to go. So you need to prepare yourself in order to take over the new Africa that we're talking about. Thank you.
You're welcome. You talked about Africa has a human resources, but what African lacks, to me, today they don't have the brain. So they need these people who have the brain to come and teach them. And also, secondly, before you talk on that again, we have, if you look at our environment, the colonial masters, they have made their country in such a way that everybody is running to go there. So the Africans themselves, I believe that they too have the right, or maybe they are supposed to. Nobody is supposed to do it for them. They are supposed to make their own place too favorable where they can be living in.
I want us to know, I want Africans that are listening to me, you that are listening to me, to listen very well. It is Africa that built America. Yes. It is Africa that has built Europe. Listen very well. Africa did not build China, but Africa built China indirectly, because the resources that China used to build China, a good portion of the resources came from Africa, Southern America, and other countries in the world. So Africa has contributed in building America, building Europe, building other continents. It's African manpower, it's African brains that were used, that were put into a play. It's African resources that have been used to build America, to build Europe. It's African resources that have been used. But these same continents or nations have made it difficult for Africans to build their own continent by walking through the African leadership that have been like a stumbling block to the progress and the involvement of African youth in their continent. The African leadership is a stumbling block because they know what should be done. For example, the creation of technical universities as a priority has been done elsewhere. African leaders know this. Are they doing it? No. They're not doing it. And they know that by not putting in place these technical universities and so on, they will not be able to develop their space. Because that is where you produce the great engineers, not theoretical engineers who don't know anything, who have just learned paperwork and write exam and score A grade. That's not what we are talking about. We're talking about people that have a space that is enabled, that have institutions, that have what it takes, that have the requirement of producing professionals of high class. That is what Africa was supposed to have done. They are creating fake and phony institutions that have no use every day, whereas that which is useful, they are not creating them. So Africa has had this malaise. Malaise has been the influence of the European and Americans. Do you know that more than half of the shares of what people call the African Development Bank is owned by the United States? African Development Bank, hear very well, African Development Bank. Then the United States is the greatest shareholder. Does that make sense? It does not make sense. And many people don't know, and they will hardly say this. The United States is the highest shareholder in the African Development Bank. How can it be called African Development Bank and the US is the highest shareholder of the African Development Bank? It does not make sense. Whereas Africa has resources that they can put and invest and be the highest shareholder. So the United States still dictates the functioning of the African Development Bank. Is that not witchcraft? Is that not witchcraft? They control the World Bank. Europe controls IMF. They have still come to Africa again to control the African Development Bank. They cannot do that in China. I want to expose some of this witchcraft. A bank is called African Development Bank.
They come and buy
The
shares.
principal shareholder is no. It's a colonial trick so that they will be able to regulate what should be done in Africa. Africa should not have the upper hand for her development. It's a trick. African leaders are the ones, African nations are the ones that are supposed to be the highest shareholders so that they will have control. They will be able to talk African things. The African Union is sponsored, 2/3 of its sponsorship come from Europe. That's why it's not independent. It cannot take decisions without the influence of the Europeans. When then will you be independent? If the greatest institution, the biggest institutions in Africa are controlled by European and US forces, when will Africa sit up? So the space is in a way that African youth have been left and kept aside. They have not been prepared to develop their continent. Because what they need to develop their continent, the African leaders are not providing it. Whereas the means, the resources are there to enable African leaders to put this in place. It is not that it's not possible. It's possible. Because the resources are there. As the African continent, they can put a lot of these technical universities all over Africa. And it's possible to. Then now, on the other hand, the brains that have studied elsewhere, they too are not coordinated. They too are still pursued by the African spirit where they don't want to work together. Like they too would have put themselves together, form a strong force, and come back. Because it's only by having that force that they can challenge the status quo of these wicked African governments that are in place. Individuals cannot do it. Because many have tried as individuals, they have failed. Because they as individuals don't have that capacity, that ability. Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, we are talking about the youth themselves. You said the colonial masters and the leaders, they are ganged up to not give this youth a lot of opportunities for them to develop Africa.
Yes.
Let's look at the African youth themselves. Are they creative? Do they think out of the box? Do they want to go the extra miles to develop Africa?
African youths are the best in the world. They are the best. They are hard-working African youth. But there is something that propels hard work. People work hard when they see the reward that is attached to hard work. African youths have worked hard for too long, but not having been rewarded. Because their systems are not rewarding. They are exploitative. They are corrupt. They are nepotic. Those who have the competence are not given the opportunities. Those who don't have the competence are given the opportunities because their parents, their grandparents are in authority. And those who have the competence and are able are not given the opportunity. So you can see the problem. So in as much as African youths have been working hard, they are not rewarded proportionately to their hard work. That is why they seek to go where hard work is proportionally rewarded. But it's not working for the good of Africa. It's not working for the good of Africa. We know of the many cases of many students, many Cameroonian youth who go to professional schools where they have to use a corrupt means to go. Whereas the 5 A's, the 4 A's, and the very intelligent students who have succeeded in the baccalaureate and the GCA levels are not given that opportunity because they don't have the means, the resources to go and corrupt officials to find themselves in those institutions. So even where you have few of those institutions, they have been blocked by corruption. So that the poor, who are very intelligent, don't have access. Instead of creating many of these institutions and let Cameroonian youth exploit these institutions, or African youth exploit these institutions, unfortunately, the institutions have been coined in a way that it only favors the corrupt. And the children of those that are not corrupt, that don't want to be corrupted, that don't want to corrupt, find themselves in a difficult situation. That is the Africa we were talking about. An Africa that does not have meritocracy. Meritocracy does not exist. It is corruption, it's wickedness, it's nepotism, it's tribalism. And you can go on naming the ills. And these are some of the manipulative schemes that are in place to prevent African youth from progressing. The African youth have been battling it out. Just the fact that they are struggling to pass through the Mediterranean Sea, struggling to pass through Mexico and the rest, it still shows you the spirit of hard work and seriousness. They are doing all in order to make it. They have not sat down. So we cannot blame them for using those routes. They have been pushed to the wall. And they are looking for survival outlets that can lead them to survival. So nobody can blame them. If their space were enabled and giving them the opportunity to thrive, they will not be going through those routes. So the problem is the African leaders. The problem is the colonial masters that have made the African space not to be favorable for African youths by working with corrupt African leaders to spoil the African space so that it will not be favorable for African youth, so that rather they should rush elsewhere and be useful in those countries, in those nations. And Africa herself, that has this youth, is not benefiting from the youth.
Mr. Masoke, how did you come up with all of this results, these findings that you are giving out now? How did you come
the findings are online. Yes, they are in books.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
They are in books and they are online. Go online, you see them. They're published. The problems that African youths are facing is there. So it's not news. It's existing.
It's poverty, unemployment, all of those things. Those are the things that are found in the books.
No, there are many things. I'm just trying to quote a few. There are many things which I'm still to come. The program is still unfolding.
Yes.
Yes, there are many things. We'll talk about all those things here today, so that the African youth should understand the stakes and what they need to do in order to come out from this grip, this yoke of wicked leadership, bad governance in Africa. Very, very important.
All right, thank you very much. I see somebody struggling to call since. So, yeah, we don't take calls. This program, we don't take calls. Just send us your SMS, okay? Because you have been insisting. I know you want to say something. Just text. No matter how long it is, I'm going to read it. And Mr.
Yes,
Masoke,
it's good to always let them know that, so that
yes.
they're not struggling to call.
Yeah, so you can send us your SMS. The number is on your screen. You can send us an SMS, direct SMS, or you can text us through WhatsApp. No matter how long the message is, we are still going to read it and you are going to get your response. Okay, Mr. Masoke, looking at let me take Cameroon, for example, as
Yes.
our case study. What are they doing for the youth? Recently, and not even recently, on Friday, the president of the National Youth Council is going around the country, is doing a national tour to meet the youth. And she was here on Friday to meet the youth here in Buea. And after visiting the governor, they had a meeting. And that meeting was a platform, a dialogue for youth to dialogue in preparation for the national dialogue. They are going out to different regions. According to her, they want to go right to the grassroots to get this youth maybe come up with their problems and all of that, so that they will see how they will be able to solve them. And then the most other aspect that caught my attention there is the fact that money was given, and these youth are supposed to come up with projects. And when you come up with a good project, they are going to give you money for you. You read it. If somebody takes that project and go through the project, they will be able to grant them the contract, because this is something that is available, as I'm telling you now.
the state, that is not the job of the state. That
National
Youth Council, that is not her job. If she doesn't know her, you don't let her call me on phone. I'll tell her what
she's not the one giving them the contract, or is the government? She's
I'm
just
not
passing
talking
the
about
information.
contracts. I'm talking about contract. What she's doing, going left and right, that is not her job.
Okay.
Yes, she doesn't know. She should not claim that she does not know the problems of the youth. The government knows the problem of the youth more than her, and the government have refused. I mean, I'm talking about the Cameroon and African governments have refused to do that which they are supposed to do to the youth. They are not ignorant. It's not by this small political trip of the national. What can she do? Which power does she have? We're talking about government. We're not talking about a small individual who has no powers, who is just sent as a figurehead to go and make noise so that they'll carry it in news that the African. No, please. Such persons, unfortunately, such a person, please contact me if you can get my phone number. Let us talk.
Yes.
What am I trying to say? My sister, what has made other nations to develop? We cannot be indifferent. They put in place institutions that produce professionals. They put in place a functional private sector. There is supposed to be a link between universities. The government are supposed to work together. Government is supposed to create institutions that will produce professionals. It is professionals through the private sector.
The African government's policies